Says they record.
Okay.
You know, that one corner.
Good evening. I'd like to call this regularly scheduled meeting for the Marquette Township Board to order for Tuesday, January 21st, 2014. Could all please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Clerk Richard, roll call please.
Trustee Durant,
Here.
Trustee Trescott,
Here.
Trustee LaRue,
Here.
Trustee Bumpo,
Here.
Treasurer Johnson,
Here.
Clerk Retire is here, and Supervisor Levita.
Here.
Staff present is Manager Gerard, Superintendent Page, John Marks on the ZBA, Dave Wiegand, Planning Commission, and Mike Springer, Recreation Commission, or Recreation Committee, I should say.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda is approval of the consent agenda. As you know, the consent agenda is here to hold items that typically do not require immediate board action. This evening's includes the approval of prior meeting minutes of January 7th, received committee reports of the sheriffs from December, fire marshal of December, the wastewater production report of December, Market Area Wastewater Treatment Facility Advisory Board presentation is actually requested moved over to agenda item number 8. It should have been under where it says public hearing on agenda number 8. So we will need a motion to move that. We also have the Roads Committee report, approved minutes of December 3rd and draft minutes of January 8th. Bills payable in the amount of $134,445.93. Clerk Terry.
Along with the change of the presentation, we move to number 8, I would like to add, under approval of the prior meeting minutes, I'd just add closed session minutes that we and I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Second. Motion is second. Anyone else? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. Next item is approval of the remainder of the agenda. Are there any board members wishing to make changes to the remainder of the agenda as presented?
I'll move to accept the agenda as presented.
Support.
We have motion and support. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? The motion passes. Thank you. That'll bring us to public comment. Those members of the public wishing to make comment may do so at this time. First and last name, approach the podium, please.
Mike Springer, 206 Eagles Nest. I had the honor tonight at the Rec Committee to be elected as the chair for 2014. Dave Wiegand is the secretary, and Pete LaRue will be the vice chair. With that, just a couple things the Rec Committee is working on that we want to keep the board and the community appraised of. One of the things is that we have a rec plan that is being updated. Jason McCarthy's working hard on that. We are going to have, the rec committee is going to have a special meeting on Monday, February 3rd at 5:30 to finalize the rec plan. And if everything goes well with that, we hope to get a copy of that rec plan to the board members and to the planning commission. It will go to the planning commission for their approval on the 12th. This is tentative and proposed, and then also bring it to the board on February 18th. And at that time, hopefully you'll have had it long enough so you'll be able to make a decision on the 18th, because we need to get the rec plan in by March 1st. And also, the rec committee is looking at how do we fund some of these projects that we'd like to do, and we're looking, tentatively, we're looking at 5 different grants right now. And we'll keep you posted on those, and you'll have a choice of what grants you think we should go after. So that's an update on the rec committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Anyone else?
Jim Clark, Manager, Cornerstone Development. I just need to set aside some time for item 11B, and hopefully Brownlee Hall from Town Hall Contracting will be here by then, so we can give you an update on each country.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
There's no other public comment. We'll close public comment, go to board member comment. Those members of the board wishing to comment may do so at this time. Lynn?
Excuse me. I did not get to the planning commission meeting last week, for the same reason I missed this meeting, our first meeting this year. But I wanted to give you a rough update on what was on the agenda anyway. The election of officers was already also held at that meeting. I was elected secretary. The planning commission was given a copy of the bylaws because we have 2 new members, so they wanted to make sure if there were any questions or issues, the new people had the information and we're supposed to go over those. There was also the nomograph for the 2 new districts that were being proposed for forest preserve and scenic residential was also in there. I believe it's probably going to be it's probably our last look through before it comes back to the board, or I'm not even sure if it does come to the board, but before it's approved anyway. And then there was a big kickoff meeting December 12th of last year on US 41 and M28 corridor kickoff meeting, and it's quite a proposal on what they expect to accomplish at least by June of this year, 14. It looks pretty ambitious would be probably a good word, so I'm hoping that's going to follow that same timetable, and whatever more information I get, I will let you know.
Excellent. Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll close board member comment. The next item on our agenda is former B4 is now 8, is the Marquette Area Wastewater Treatment Facility Advisory Board presentation. Superintendent Page is here, and Kirk, if you'd come to the podium, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to give a brief presentation on the Marquette Area Wastewater Treatment Facility and the Advisory Board. And I memorized, I'll have to actually look at it. Also test my coordination, which is not working.
Oh.
Okay, a little bit of history of the plant. The planning for the Marquette, the original Marquette wastewater treatment plant began in 1941. The construction was completed in 1951, and it was constructed as a primary treatment plant. A secondary treatment upgrade was constructed in 1978. That was also when Marquette Township and Chocolate Township became part of the ownership of that facility. And then in 2008 was a redesign and basically complete reconstruction. Here's an example of the treatment. Prior to 1953, there was no treatment. And then up until 1978, there was only primary treatment. And then in 1978, was the upgrade to the secondary treatment. And you can see, this is an example of what was being discharged into Lake Superior through the various phases. Here's a flow chart of the treatment process, starting with the collection system. Removes grit through a screening process. Goes through clarifiers. Then there's biological phosphorus removal. Then aeration basins. Then secondary clarifiers. And then disinfection prior to discharge. Then there's return activated sludge back to the primary clarifiers. And then some of it's also sent to the digesters. So it's kind of a complicated process. is a combination of mechanical, chemical, and biological treatment. The grit from the removal goes to the landfill. That's the beginning of the process. The final discharge goes to the Carp River and Lake Superior. And then the digester, or what remains of the digester, goes to a mine reclamation site. Some of it also is going to, there's a project where we are actually partnering with a project that's actually growing trees. Okay, the advisory board is composed of 5 members. There's 3 from the city of Marquette, and 1 each from Marquette Township and Chocolate Township, and then each member also has an alternate. The board meets the 3rd Thursday of every month at the Marquette area wastewater treatment facility. And of course, it's a public meeting. Everyone's encouraged to attend. We rarely get any visitors, so be glad to have you. Or if you get a little bit more detail if this is not enough for you. Oops. Okay, the responsibilities of the advisory board are basically defined in a 3-party intergovernmental agreement from 1977. And that's enabled by Act 135, Public Act 1951. Under that contract, the city of Marquette is the contract operator of the facility. And then the advisory board oversees the operation of the facility under the provisions of the agreement. We recommend rules and regulations regarding the facility operation. We allocate and assign fixed demand costs. And demand costs are primarily debt, but it includes things like insurance, various fees that we have to pay, police protection, that sort of thing. And the demand costs are based on the ownership. City of Marquette owns 85%, Marquette Township owns 10%, and Chocolate Township owns 5%. We also allocate and assign operational maintenance costs, and that's based on the actual measured flow. We also make recommendations regarding the proposed operating budget for the treatment facility. Covered that already. I'll just do this randomly, if that's okay. Some of the recent accomplishments, we completed a major facility upgrade in 2008. And we've had 5 years of operational improvements, and the project cost was $15.3 million. We constructed a 1,200 cubic yard biosolid storage facility to meet the MDEQ 180-day biosolids on-site storage requirement. And the cost of that was $444,000. We actually paid that out of our own funds. We didn't have to borrow money. We do have a capital improvement fund that we set aside for projects that are, small enough that we don't have to bond. We've achieved sustainable regulatory compliance, and we've stabilized the rates. We've reduced biosolids disposal cost, and we've stabilized the process control for MDEQ compliance. And I say we, but all the board does is advise. There's an excellent staff under the direction of Kirk Goodman, who is the superintendent of the wastewater treatment facility and also the water plant. And he has an excellent staff working for him. There's the biosolid storage facility. Some of our goals for the upcoming year are to develop a long-term biosolids management plan and reducing biosolids handling cost and improve operational efficiency. Pursue more land application sites, such as brownfield reclamation sites, additional agricultural land, and we're also looking at biosolids compost partnership with the Marquette County Solid Waste Management Authority. We hope to maintain the current rates for wastewater services and seek additional grant funding opportunities. Formalize standard operating procedures, develop a formal asset management plan, which is actually, there has been an application submitted for a grant for that. Update the wastewater treatment facility website and develop formal grease trap inspection and enforcement program with Marquette and Marquette Townships. We actually already each have inspection programs and enforcement programs, but we'd just like to have more cooperation and standardization of procedures. Another project, this is actually just completed recently, is a network segmentation project. Separated the city network, separated from the city network to address security and reliability issues. Prior to that, they were networked along with the city network. And actually, water and wastewater facilities now are pretty much required to be separate from networks for security reasons. And some of the issues are going to be a permit renewal in 2014, loss of senior staffing. The last 2 or 3 years have been people that have retired. Federal and state issues and transitions. The agencies are constantly changing, reassigning duties, reorganizing. It's become kind of an annual process now. And an uncertain regulatory future. There's still a sizable movement to either weaken or basically get rid of the EPA, which is the primary regulator. And that's it. Any questions?
Questions for Kurt? Lynn?
The last big improvement you said was 2008, I think. How long do you figure that's going to last? What's the next big step that you have to, and when?
Well, hopefully at least 20 years. It could be as long as 4 years. So, actually, the last upgrade we did was actually it's pretty common all over the country. Back in the 70s, there were lots of that's when the EPA was established. Grant monies became available. A lot of plants switched to a rotating biological disc type of treatment. It's basically a very large drum, a series of drums, and the bottom portion is actually wastewater that rotates, and you actually develop that treatment by organisms that grow in the drum. But also at the same time, regulations are changing, so one of the new restrictions was ammonia. In that particular process, not to remove ammonia that well, so basically we returned to an activated sludge type plant, which is actually a pretty old type of treatment. In fact, I believe that's what we had before. So the advantages of the activated sludge are it's a fairly stable process, and the big cost of that is actually concrete. So as you can see from the earlier slide, there are lots of different components to it. And it's basically moving it around from one tank to another tank. So, but it works well. But it did take a lot of tweaking initially. And I have to give another shout out to the staff as well, because this plant was reconstructed, and of course you can't stop operating the plant to wait for construction. So, they did a great job keeping treatment process going. And then, of course, since it was a different process, it took basically until just recently to get all the bugs worked out. There were, which is very typical of any kind of startup process. So again, they finally got it together, and it seems to be working pretty smoothly. So,
Other questions?
Hey, Kurt, do you have that information that you just pointed out on paper?
no, I could print it out for you.
I'm kind of interested to have the facts and how it can go like that. We
Sure.
have to read at home instead of trying to memorize what we got here.
Yep.
Thank you.
Do that, put it in your box.
Bertie, with the upgrade of that in 2008, what's the capacity of it? When you think you're gonna have to move again as the area grows or things happen? Yeah.
Well, it's actually, you have to look ahead 20 years to see what your anticipated growth is. And as you can see, we actually are small. Our flow is actually less than 10% of the actual flow into the plant. The city is pretty much tapped out already. I mean, they're gonna have some growth, but fortunately, it's not gonna be that much. In the chocolate, ironically, they purchased capacity back in 1978. In fact, they initially owned, I believe, it was 14%. And then they immediately turned around and took a new direction, basically saying, we don't want no state consumers, so, but they'd already signed the contract, so they've been slowly, over the years, we purchased some of their capacity and actually purchased some from the city as well. So, the growth is primarily gonna be Marquette Township.
So Kirk, can you address that for the board, how that works? You had a slide up that showed the ownership, 85% City of Marquette, 10% Marquette Township, 5% Chocolate Township. And as Marquette Township grows, what happens from an ownership perspective? If we start using more capacity, do we assume more of the ownership of that plant?
Well, yeah, it's a community plant, so therefore it's designed, for X amount of capacity. And it's allocated to the 3 units based on their anticipated demand. And it's worked out well so far, and again, we've been the ones that have grown, so, but we still have excess capacity. But let's say we reach our maximum amount. There's still, again, we're only 10%, so there's still plenty of capacity that is available to the community. And it'd basically be a negotiation process where, we would say, mutually agree on basically the benefit and the cost of the capacity, and then just buy it.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah, if I may, if you look at that chart that's up there, just below the 85%, 15 breakout of the percentages, there's a statement there that says it's allocate and assign operation and maintenance costs, and so that's where we see it first. As our township continues to grow, it's actually measured by the flow that actually goes in. So as our flow rates increased, our participation in those cost allocations would increase, which would eventually lead to assuming more ownership of the plant. And most likely where that would occur is Chocolate Township will probably give up some of their ownership, since they've made a conscious decision that they're not going to extend utilities, they're not going to entertain commercial development. So they'll likely not use the 5% capacity that they currently have, so it's required from them, as well as the city. Let's assume that the city goes stagnant basically in terms of growth, because it's right, there's not a whole lot of property that's available in the city. Let's assume that Northern Michigan University decides to build their own plant, let's say, and they're no longer part of the city would give up that ownership.
Okay.
I can't imagine that they would want to hang on to that ownership if they don't have the demand to utilize it.
Okay. Pete?
Kirk, in the last construction on the highway a couple years back, is it height big enough to take care of our capacity for our growth pattern?
You talk about the interceptor?
The interceptor along the highway that was dug
Oh,
dug up
yes.
a couple years back.
Yeah, actually, what we did is we basically had to reconstruct a portion of it, and it had to do more with the, not the capacity of it, but we had kind of a weird situation. We had, there was a stream crossing, okay, and then the discharge manhole, and the stream crossing was like a board and jack, so we had a pipe inside of a carrier pipe. So that's extremely difficult to, you know, to change. So anyway, the discharge manhole, there was basically a gas main right down in the flow line of the manhole. And that was just a matter of, you know, that's the way it, oh, and there's also bedrock. So what we did is we basically relocated that manhole, added another manhole to basically get out of the gas mains. Because you can't.
Primarily a design correction as opposed to an operational correction.
So in other words, what happened would be it would collect grease, for example. And since it was close to a stream, you know, it's illegal basically to discharge sanitary sewage onto the ground. And it's way illegal to discharge into a stream, so that's why we did that.
But I think Pete asked, the capacity on 41, it's there, we don't have to worry about that for
Right,
the
yeah.
future?
You know, the interceptor is fine for our projected growth off into the future, 20, 25 years. The issue that we had at that point first, that was mainly a design issue when it was originally constructed, so the project that we had was mainly to correct that design flaw. But it had really didn't have anything to do with capacity.
So we're all right.
We're good, we're fine there.
We have capacity as a township to meet our expected or anticipated growth over the next 25 years or more. Let's just say, for example, like a Duke Life Point wanted to relocate to Marquette Township because they thought it would save them, let's just say $1.2 million a year to locate here in taxes, for an example, off the top of my head. We would have plenty of capacity to meet the demands that they would put on the system from a wastewater perspective.
Yes, we would. Actually, we just completed a water reliability study that was mandated by the EDQ. And it was for water, but obviously we're looking at water demands. So we actually looked at, you know, we had to project, you know, short-term, intermediate term, and long-term. And we actually put, for example, a hospital and actually a water park facility into the near term as possible impacts. And to do that, you know, there's an existing hospital, so it's pretty easy to find their demand. And there's, you know, also existing water parks in other areas. So basically, if those two came on board, we would have existing treatment capacity right now without having to purchase capacity.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none. Thanks a lot, Kirk. We really appreciate the opportunity. It was a very well put together presentation, and we appreciate you informing the board.
I think what we'll do is we'll put the PowerPoint presentation up on the website. So you can access it easily.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. If there's no forum discussion, we'll move to unfinished business. 10A, continued discussion of the 2013 through 2015 strategic goals. We did have this in front of us last time, and had decided that we wanted to push it back to this time. And one of the things that I had asked the board to do is just to familiarize themselves again with the master plan 2013 as well as the 2013 capital improvements plan. And the reason that I did that is because as we work towards our achieving our goals that we set out for ourselves in our board strategic plan, I just really wanted to revisit it from a board standpoint and talk about the importance of not only our development of a strategic plan, which, as you know, is based upon the citizen survey responses that we got, the meetings that we held in various locations throughout the township to gather additional public input, and then much considered thought and discussion amongst the board members to arrive at the, I think, 5 overall goals that we chose last year to move forward on. A lot of our focus last year was necessarily put on the completion of the facilities, and for good reason. And so in order for us to get the conversation going again back to the strategic plan, and I did submit it out to the board in a more completed format than we had looked at last year. All of this in this entire package that I sent out with the mission, the vision, some of the highlights in our history, all of this stuff should just be updated from time to time. You know, we have the SWOT analysis in there and then move into our individual goals. But none of these things operate in a silo. It's important that as a board, we also make sure that we're looking at the master plan and understanding it. And that includes the capital improvements plan, because all of those goals are tied together. Our strategic plan can't operate on a silo. None of those can either. They're all intricately meshed. One can't work without the other. And so one of the things that I asked about the master plan is because that's really a stated vision. You know, the planning commission puts it together based upon the direction that the township says they're going in, and they say, hey, this is our long-range planning tool. This is what we're going to look like as we move down the road. And the board adopts that master plan when it comes to them and says, we agree that this is the master plan that we're moving forward with. Part of that is the capital improvements plan. For the last 6 months or so, I've been going through a lot of capital improvements plans from municipalities all over. I've got 2 that I really like, and I'm going to propose that we start to shift our vision of what our capital improvements plan looks like to maybe more resemble some of the other ones that I've seen. And the reason being is when you look at our capital improvements plan, it does what it's supposed to do, and that's all the department heads put in a request about things that are going to be needed to come before them, and then they base their budgets on it accordingly. I noticed in our budget discussions that we sometimes are surprised when, like Superintendent Page from Public Works, for example, he puts these together every 2 years. He puts his information in the capital improvements plan. It says that he's putting money aside for various improvements or needed repairs. It comes back, the planning commission agrees, the board agrees, and then he comes to budget time, and then we're asking him questions about, well, why do we need to do that? Well, is that important? Well, we've already agreed that it's important when we adopted the master plan that included the capital improvements plan. And so you can imagine sometimes, well, Superintendent Page is confused when we start asking questions about, well, maybe we're not going to do that. He's using it as a budget tool like he should. He says, these are the things I think are important. So if we don't think they're important, we have to do that much earlier in the process than in the annual budget. And so I think that the reason I asked you to go through this is to look at it and see some of the projects that are in there. I know one of the CIPs that I really liked out of another community in downstate Michigan, they actually prioritize all of those. So when it comes through, you look at it as whether it's has to be done or would be nice to be done. And they actually put it on a priority list so that when you look at that CIP request coming in from department heads, this is critical needs, this is something that needs to be done but can be pushed back a couple of years. And I think it would really help with the board's understanding of some of the funding. And we talk about the money that's in reserved funds and what are we doing with it. If we have a much better put together capital improvements plan, I think it will be easier from a board's perspective to start to understand that our strategic agenda is tied to that capital improvements plan, is tied to the master plan, is tied to the rec plan, that we're all working towards one vision, and it will probably make the budgeting process easier, because one of the first questions we should ask ourselves when the budget lands in your lap is, how does this fit with the CIP, with the master plan, with our strategic agenda, with our rec plan? all those things that we put together, we've got different, the planning commission working on it, the rec committee working on some things, the board's got their strategic agenda. Do all of those things go together? Is the budget accomplishing what we said we were gonna set out for? The master plan is looking 28 years down the road. The capital improvements plan is looking at, hey, we're gonna have to spend money sometime in the next 10 years. Our strategic agenda, we're saying this is what we're gonna accomplish in the next 3 to 5 years. It's a much shorter window. Same thing with our rec plan, is a 5-year rec plan that is going through. Are those things tied together? Absolutely. So when the budget comes before us, like I said, the first question you have to ask is, are we funding the things we said we were gonna do? And if we're not, why not? And so that's why I asked everyone to look it over, and I'm just gonna open it up for board comment. I don't expect that we're gonna approve our the board's strategic agenda today. In fact, Kirkatari and I were talking earlier today and said that it's probably gonna be a work session, or at the very least a forum discussion, just as we can go through and update and initiate the 5 goals that we have in here. But I'll open up for the board, and now that you've had an opportunity to look at the master plan in relation to the capital improvements plan, in relation to our strategic agenda, and are we getting it right? Are we funding the things we're supposed to fund? Are we planning accordingly? Master plan 20 years, CIP 10 years out, our agenda 3 to 5 years out. Pete?
We sit down and we agree to these things, and then we try to project how far ahead we have to go with this. And we know what the money is gonna come to, but then when we come to our budget, then we say, well, we have to raise it a little bit or cut back or something like that. And that's where we have to sort of keep our eye on the ball and make sure that things happen, because we're not talking about today or tomorrow or next year. We're talking long range, and that's what we have to keep in sight. It's hard decision to come by and say we're gonna raise something like 50 cents or 75 cents or that, but long range, if we don't do it, we're gonna be hurt. We are a growing township. We have to have service, we have to have water, we have to have sewer, we have to have roads and recreation in order to keep these people here. Today at the recreation, we're talking about having some kind of a road or a recreation area to come from 492 over to US 41. There's a lot of green area. And we have to be able to put that up there for people to build houses in Mason Bluff in that area. That's where our growth is. They're over here on the other side of the road. But if we don't have the infrastructure, we can't do the building. And I have to agree with it. They're tough decisions when it comes to budget time, but we sort of have to keep our eye on the ball and move ahead. We're going to be the growth pattern of the DC here.
Thanks, Pete. Dan?
I guess I'd like to know exactly, with the CIP, there's a lot of stuff that should have started last year. I'm just curious as to if any of this has been started or is completed. That would help a lot. Also, and I understand the fact that this would come in handy for our budgetary process, and I don't want to get into a major discussion of that, but some of this was identified in the budgets. We do know that the money that was put in specifically for some of these projects had to be taken out for other reasons. And I think that was the biggest concern that we had as to if we feel these are important, the money should be taken out at some other point. And I'm not saying that we decide that, but I think if we decide what is important to Kurt can work independently on deciding where he's going to get money if he needs money. And I agree with the prioritizing of the projects. Again, I would really like to see exactly which projects have been started or are completed of the CIP also.
Do you think it would be helpful, Dan, if it was, I mean, they have it in there, the rank or importance of the project within the department submitting it, and if we, as a board, decided that it was more clearly structured so that it was in essential, or immediate, I mean, could possibly be delayed, however you want to word it, however you want to classify it, so that there was like 3 buckets that you could put it in. And, when you looked at these CIP projects, you looked at these, they said essential. So then from his, we use Public Works, for example, and they have restricted funds, they could be earmarked as those CIP funds, right? And it would be essential, and those ones are under that essential thing, and that money's not to be touched, right? Now, would that help in your budgeting
Well,
process?
I think that would help immensely. I think as a board, we need to sit down in a work session or whatever with Kurt, as well as the other department heads also, and really listen to their arguments as to what they feel is important. And we have to look at it from what we feel is important as per the long-range plan, and try to tweak them both. I think, and I agree with you, if we find out that one is definitely, one can hold off, we don't have to worry about it for 5 or 6 or 7 years down the road, then fine. But if we have something that's immediate, we need to just, that money needs to be put in that specifically for that specific thing, I should say, which is what we said all along. We were trying to set up an account just for X, whatever the X is, and say this money can't be touched. This money is there. We expect to start this project in 2 years, and we expect to have the money in hand, or a good portion of the money in hand, to start the project. We don't need to keep taking money from that project. So I agree 100% that that's probably the best way for us to go.
Pete?
I looked the other night, I was looking at the projects and dug out some old papers I had. And I come up with, we almost could put it like the roads has a pager study. You know, it's how they're rated, and then you can upgrade it every year. You know, sometimes something gets worse, then you upgrade that pager study. And you can almost do that with the project. So you know exactly where you're standing. That's the way I looked at it the other night anyway.
And Lynn?
I was waiting for you to call on me. When I started on the planning commission a few years ago, that was one of the first charges that was different. And the secretary at the time put a spreadsheet together, spent quite a few hours, and legal sheets of paper, and the commission went over and over and over the best way to put that together and to read it and interpret it and use it. Well, then this, in 2012, when this one was submitted, we had some discussion about what was going to happen to it. The secretary said, well, you know, I put all this work into it the first time, and I don't think anybody looked at it. And that's kind of, when we came to this particular format, we had the same discussion and said, so where is this going? Does the board see it? Did they look at it? Of course, because I was involved, I was more informed probably than the rest of you, if you read it or got a copy or not. But there's well over $2 million worth of projects here that Public Works has submitted, and they're pretty much all designated for 2013 and 14, which would have been appropriate in 2012 when it was done. But I don't, some of this came from some of the points that I made with the manager's goals and what he was trying to get done and accomplish this year too, is we haven't sat down and even approved these projects. We haven't talked about them. Some of them are necessary, and as far as having some kind of a delineation of the urgency, yeah, that would be, you know, Kirk says the interceptor out on 41 has to be done, this is what it costs. And to follow up with what Dan was saying, that's where we were thinking, or I understood it that way, that these funds for this stuff that he had asked for was in those earmarked accounts, and that it shouldn't have been touched. So somehow I think that's where we have to come around. This ends up getting approved through the planning commission and through the board as part of the master plan, but it should be discussed. It should be, we need to know the ins and outs of every one of these projects, whether it's a fire project or a $1 million water project, and analyze them, what we're going to do with Mason's Bluff, what direction are we going to go with the equipment that's there, that's just sitting in the ground. We need to decide something about that, and that should tie into this too. It all has to be, and we don't do that, and that's where, the last time this came up when we were talking about these kinds of projects, I said, we need to have more work sessions or more forum discussions or something where we actually discuss this direction. Do do we wanna do this? He can put it in his plan and say, yeah, this needs to be done by 2015, well, what if we don't wanna go that direction, whatever it is? If it's a repair, that's different. But a lot of this stuff is capital improvements, so things that have to be either upgraded, repaired, or new development. And if we have more development coming into the township, maybe that's where our dollars have to go. And then which direction, north, west, not much east, but we've got south too. So I'm all for sitting down and hashing this out, because I've got circles and questions and, who pays for this? Is it gonna be mandatory? We have to have so many customers. How much is it gonna cost them? 30,000 based on 36 customers? Do we wanna invest our money for 36 customers, or do we have something that's more important for infrastructure-wise, like for a hospital or something? Is there something else we have to do? That's my answer.
So therein lies the whole concept of that capital improvements planning, is that our master plan, including, land use, and you're on the planning commission as our board representative, so you spend a lot of time talking about what our future land use is gonna be in the community. What do we expect to see there? Is this gonna be a residential area, long-term? When we put that master plan together as a community, we're saying, this is our vision, right? So that's why, it's the Planning Enabling Act that requires any township, the Planning Enabling Act of 2003 requires a capital improvements plan for any township who also owns or operates, either alone or jointly, a water or wastewater system, right? So the Planning Commission is required to prepare that document. When departments make those requests, and departments are working with our chosen administrative staff to decide, does this meet what has laid out in the master plan? The master plan says this is gonna be the future residential area, this is gonna be a commercial area. Okay, what do we have to do to be prepared for that? What projects are you rolling into the CIP? The board has to determine what's the dollar amount that's gonna trigger it, have to be in that CIP. Is it $10,000? Is it $15,000? What do we want in there? And that's gonna trigger it. Then it urgency, like I said, maybe we give it a scale of 1 to 5. 1 is critical need, has to be done, what's it gonna happen over the next few years? Some are gonna be out for 10 years. We have to determine what that thing is gonna be, what that length of term will be. But that's why when it comes to us, and the master plan comes to us, and we're like, what a great master plan, we love it. We think this is a great, we didn't have any questions about the CIP as a board at all. We approved these projects when we approved the master plan. We told our department heads, absolutely, the board approves these projects. Now you can imagine Superintendent Page's surprise in the budget session, we're like, we're not sure we're gonna do that. And he's like, it's been approved in the last 3 master plans. The board never raised any questions about it. Now you understand, right, from his standpoint, he's like, we're saying, well, we haven't talked about it yet. When we get our master plan and the CIP, it should already be, yep, we understand how this fits into the master plan. We understand why they're submitting this. Staff agrees, the planning commission's agreed. Now we sit down with the planning commission as a document comes to us. We hold a meeting with the planning commission. We have a discussion about, why these things were included, why some were excluded. Did it meet the board's direction? Does it match up the master plan, our strategic agenda, rec plan, you name it? And that's why, we approved it, but we never discussed it. We didn't really dig into it as a board. That's our fault. As a board, that's our fault.
Yeah.
But that's why I thought, we've got to do a better job with it. We have to do a better job with it. Because right now, we're going through the motions, we're getting it, the departments are planning, they're trying to sock money aside, it gets to us and we're like, yeah, sure, looks good. Until we have to set aside money for it, we're like, well, we're not sure. And then it's a problem, because he's based his entire budget on his work output, on what he put in here, saying, you guys still agree that this is the direction we're going in? And we say, absolutely, we agree, until October, when we don't agree anymore, because we don't want to pay for it. And so that's where we spend a lot of time, because we're sending mixed messages to them. And I apologize to department heads, Kurt, Chief Sims, because that was the board's fault. And so what I would propose is that I'm not saying we're gonna reinvent it, it's the planning commission's thing, but we have to have given them better parameters from our standpoint of what we're looking for, what our vision is. And I think it's gonna involve a bigger work session but my goal was to say, you get it, right, it's tied to this. This isn't separate from what we're doing here, or what we said we're gonna do here.
But the board should be getting this first. I can see how it fits into the master plan and why it would go to the planning commission. But the discussions I remember for the last 2 years or 3 years with this was, from the planning level, what do we do with this? All we do is she would type it up and put it in there, because in her overall looking at it, it did fit with the master plan. So why would they object? But that doesn't necessarily mean that we approved it because we approved the direction, but we didn't approve the project. And there was nothing from the planning level that would give them that authority, I mean, they should submit it maybe to both of us at the same time. We discuss it, we have our, however, form discussion or however we want to do it. Then whether we get together with the planning commission or we do it separately, the commission is more of the tool to put it all together and see how it fits. We're the ones that have to approve this. So it really should come to us first.
Yes and no, I will agree with you that we need to be more involved, but the planning commission has to vet it. They're gonna look in and say, does this match with what we said we're gonna do? That master plan's driving most of this. If it comes to us and we say, no, we're not gonna do it, even though it meets all of our plans, then we're doing something wrong, then our master plan is wrong. Because we're saying, this is our long-range plan. The planning commission looks at all these requests and says, yes, no, and it certainly, when you look at them, it says, this one is urgent, this one's a number 1, it's critical, it has to be done. This one's a number 5, this one could be delayed if we had to, but it's still in our capital improvements plan. When you update it, the next year, you bounce it down the road again even further, and you put a further date on it. That's okay, but is it moving? I mean, the planning commission needs to vet it long before it comes to us. I think where the breakdown is we need to understand that master plan is out there, and if we object to these types of projects, then we're objecting to the master plan, and then we better revisit the master plan, because if the master plans say move in this direction, department heads are following it and moving in that direction, but it gets back to the board and we say no, then we're the ones who are going against the master plan, not anyone else, and that's wrong. I mean, the master plan is our roadmap, it's our long-term roadmap, it's looking down the road. We can't be blocking it after we're sending them, yeah, this is what we're working on, this is our vision, this is where we're going. It comes back to us and we say, no, we don't like that project. We need to change the master plan in that case. We're sending mixed signals. That's why I say they're all tied together, okay? But I think it's a great point. Diana, what do you think?
Well, I like your idea of that. I think that's the way, I like Lynn's idea because of, going back and revisiting it, don't put it away, leave it out and just keep revisiting it, that way you don't forget about it. Put it back there and you forget about it. I think it's good that you bring it up and that we all go through it again.
Ernie, what do you think?
I went through it a couple times in that, and items I brought up, Lynn and Dan and that, and yourself and that too, and I went through and looking at this, and I started writing the status, and trying to figure out what's been sent to us, where the status is. A lot of them are essential. That's fine if they're essential. I got to think, is there some way we can make a graph of these so we know where they're at, the starting time and ending time, and what's happened in between, so we have some kind of a time frame as to where things are going in that. As Lynn said, there's $1 million or more allocated in these for the wastewater and water. And that's fine if we can project ahead and find out where the dollar is coming from. Because some of them are, one of them is who and how to pay for some of this, and do the people really want it, and that, things like this here. So you have PR on some of these that you're going to have to do in that. So that's the way I looked at it, and there's so many of them that are essential, but yet, what's the status of them? How essential are they? Are they have to be done this year or next year, or can we do portions of them this year, or start laying out a time frame of moving them towards into the future to get them done at different steps in that. Some of them I've got, can you combine with one project or another? When you look at some of these in here, they're very similar, but they're different items that they're doing in that. Should they have been combined under one CIP as to the same thing, but being done at the same time, things like this here. But I was just trying to figure out how to graph it, so it's very easy to look at as to what they're asking for and what the time frames for everything. If someone says an essential, what do they mean by essential? Does it have to be done right now, or is it essential to be completed in the next 3 to 4 years? Do we have to start it today so we can get it completed? I think the definition of what essential is in that, things like this here, that's my feeling. I went through the actual master plan and made comments too. When we get to that, I have some things there.
Okay. Here's my Ernie impersonation. Where's the dollars coming from? Right?
Yes.
It's a good question. It's a very valid question. Where's the dollars coming from? You know, Ernie's the one who says it all the time to us. Look at the goals that we have in our strategic agenda. Develop, adopt, and implement an action plan for township road repair. Should road repairs be in the CIP?
I think the direction that we're going, I think we're gonna have to put them in the CIP because we're not getting any dollars from the county, so we're gonna have to address some of this in that.
But it's a capital improvements plan and we don't own roads.
I know we don't own roads,
Yeah.
but yet we have to get our people from here to there, and we're not getting any help from either the county or the state. So we're right in the middle of everything. How do we address it?
So I think that's a great answer, Ernie, and I think the board has to answer that question so that from a CIP standpoint, do we have roads in CIP? Should we? I'm just,
Legally, that's not a board question, that's a voter question.
right?
It's a what?
We have to look out for the residents.
The voter question, basically, the roads, Dennis is absolutely right. You will have a segment of your population come out and say, you're not spending any of my tax dollars on roads because we don't own them. I already pay that money to the county. The county's supposed to maintain it. So, what we've been doing, and we've been successful at it, is putting out very specific questions regarding roads, and the residents have said, yes, we want that fixed, and, they're willing to pay for it. And, from that standpoint, I think those types of things, like the roads, the other infrastructure, water and sewer, we own those. Those are assets, and those are the things that have to be in the CIP. Same thing with fire equipment, we own that, it has to be in the CIP. Those are the kinds of things you put in your CIP. Policy-wise, you take a position that you're going to, you as a body are going to attempt to do whatever you can to improve the roads, and you put that question out to the voters. If the voters say, no, we're not willing to fund a millage, then you're telling them that they don't need their roads fixed.
So Randy's argument says it doesn't belong in the CIP.
No, it does, because we have already had villages. We
And
know we're
they've
doing
given
those.
us the okay, right?
And we know from all the strategic planning sessions that that's number one, hands down.
Once the millage, if the voters approve a millage, then you become to the CIP because you now have a project that's funded.
Right. Okay, our next one, expand and execute on the recreation plan priorities. That's one of our goals that we selected for 2013-2015 strategic agenda for this board. What do we have in here in the current CIP for the recreation plan?
Nothing I can see.
You have a budget in the CIP.
I was just gonna say, so there comes your question about how much. Is there a minimum for the CIP? Do we set 10,000, 20,000, 100,000?
And that's what we did, that's what I did to bring the budget together, was the CIP requires recreation, working with the recreation committee, and with Jason, we budgeted for the Lions Field, we budgeted for trails, we budgeted for the improvement of the kitty park, and we budgeted for grant match for pursuing funds for recreation trails.
So, I mean, you look at the others, community enhancement, sense of place. I mean, some of the things we do in there, but there's probably isn't relevant to it. Enhance the safety of the township, is it relevant to the CIP? Could be, if we're talking about a fire department purchase because they want to enhance the safety or improve their response times or whatever it is. So again, we can tie that goal back in. But that's why I'm saying, you can't do one without the other. We can't do this if we don't have it here, right? Maintain fiscal health. Well, I mean, that's not a CIP expenditure, right? But, I mean, some of them, road repair, rec plan, safety of the township, those are certainly things that should be tied. We should be looking at this when we came up with these, and we didn't. We were independent on these. We were kind of independent on these, and we didn't tie this to the budget process. And this was great, and we love it. We were really complimented the planning commission on their work, and then we haven't picked it up and talked about it since as a board, and that's our fault. But now I guess you guys see where I'm coming from, what I'm trying to accomplish. Like I said, I didn't expect to fix it tonight, and the clerk retired still has to weigh in on this, but I didn't expect to fix it tonight. All I'm trying to do is show that we have a lot more work to do than just rubber stamping our strategic agenda for 2013 or 2015 and updating it. I think as a board, we need some work sessions. Randy?
Yeah, I think everything was good, all the points brought out. I think as a board, would behoove ourselves to have a board calendar. And this would probably be an excellent subject to discuss. Probably, and I hate to take up time in the summer, but even in springtime. So the CIP is directly tied to the budget in some respects, so maybe right before the budget sessions, because a lot of what's in the CIP is what we see in the budget. And then, of course, the budget's tied to the master plan and it's tied to everything else. So, I mean, they're all interrelated, but I think if we come up with a board calendar, and it should be not too specific, but, say we gotta work on the CIP maybe midsummer, right before the budget session start. Because if we don't wanna, like, if the board says we don't wanna do this project this year, and, then it won't be in the budget. It'll be much easier for us. Again, it needs to be prioritized, the CIP. I think the graphs or the spreadsheets that the planning commission came up before is probably an excellent thing. We didn't, I did not see them, that was before. I know the city of Marquette does when they do their budgets, they have, each department head has specific projects, and it's prioritized, like a wish list and critical, and, and of course, the ones on the wish list probably don't get approved for a long time, but the critical ones, you can rate that in priority, and make sure you have the funds for those for the year. And, I guess that's all I have to say, but I think a board calendar, and not only tied to this, but to other stuff too. And then then this all, again, ties back again, that we do have to bring up sometime this year is policy governance, I think. We had policy governance, that would be interrelated into this also. So, I mean, all these things tie together. And I think we have bits and pieces of things, but we have to seem to try to get it all together and get a handle on it. It'll be much easier for us to do that.
Thanks, Randy. Dan, go ahead.
I think, I look at the CIP right now, and this is, like I said, there was plenty of things in there that Kurt put in there that was for 2013. We haven't started on yet, or we have started, we haven't finished, and if we wait too long into 2014, we're now 2 years past when we're supposed to start. I do believe, I do like the idea of us prioritizing. I understand where you're coming from, that everything in the capital improvement fit to the planning commission and the group, but again, it all came down also to money. I don't think the planning commission, from their end, it fits into what the master plan works, but they don't look at it from the money standpoint. We have to look at it from the money standpoint. I think we need a joint meeting to discuss what's prioritized and pick out the projects that we know have to be done in 2014. This is done in 2014. All of our money expenditures has to go towards this. What can we back off on, kick down the road and not even worry about for 2 years? Just keep it off the table. And it's the same with roads. We know when we put out a village for roads, we know what road needs to be fixed. That road gets fixed. It should be the same for this stuff, for capital improvements. I think there is a problem that we're not communicating with the planning commission as a board. Like I said, we are in control of the money, how these actually come into place. So I think with the help of the planning commission as well as the department heads, we can come up with a plan as to what projects need to be done, when, what year, when they need to be completed, and where are we getting the money from. I think that's the most important part of this right now. So that's just my thought.
Thanks, Dan.
What helps me when you start discussing this stuff, I take my survey that the people have done, the last couple of surveys, match it to the master plan, and see if we're doing the right thing. And many times that we're out there, we want to know what the residents are telling us. And so sometimes we go back to that survey, it sort of puts you on track with the equity that we're working on, and the master plan, pretty close to what the people are telling us, because that's where the information came out. So, I know we have to, we can always put off things, but that's really not doing due diligence to your master plan. You have to find a different way of doing it.
Well, the planning commission puts their goals and objectives into that master plan, and when we approved the master plan, we just told the planning commission, we agree. We agree 100% with what you brought us. If we don't, we shouldn't agree to the master plan, we should hold a meeting with the planning commission and say, I think we have different visions here. You guys see it one way, we see it another way, we gotta come together. And I think that's a lesson learned, that we have to take the master plan much more seriously. They put a tremendous amount of work in it, and I think that our board took it too lightly than what we should have. We're busy working on our own agenda, but we can't, like I said, to start it off with, we can't be in a silo. Lesson learned, right? What I would propose is that the next agenda we'll revisit, we'll look at, actually we'll need to update our strategic agenda anyway. I wanted to just really drive home the point that those are tied together. On the next agenda, we'll revisit our specific strategic agenda, but we'll look at it with new eyes. Randy, you have a question?
If I may just offer a couple of observations. First of all, your planning commission is your key. You folks are all elected general election. Your appointments to the planning commission are key in this. Planning commission appointees should bring with them specific expertises to work on your behalf on these kinds of plans. To be able to recognize and understand the importance of the projects that the department heads are bringing to them on the capital improvement plan. It's not really your job to try and analyze what Kirk needs and what he doesn't need, and what's a priority and what's not a priority.
Right.
Along the same lines of his projects, and Kirk can speak to this if he will, but if he proposes a project for 2016, he needs to start working on that project today. To get through the permitting process, the design and engineering process, to be ready in 2016 to do that project. That's all got to be calculated into the capital improvements plan. So, from the standpoint of looking at something that was in for 2013, as an example, that's in there, that he's got in there today for 2013, we may only be at the design and engineering stage of that project. It may not be built until 2015 or 16, so the dollars wouldn't be there yet. The dollars would come as we do those projects, get the funding from the state or whatever to do those projects, and that's where the planning commission comes in. That's a function that they perform on your behalf to ensure that that stuff all gets done. From my standpoint, I need to have the capital improvement project completed and in my hands before April. If I'm going to throw it into a budget, then I'm going to have you guys approve it by, which means the planning commission has to have that, be working on that now for next year.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So I mean, there's a whole timing process here that has to be worked into that capital improvement process, so they can get their work done to have a formal report or a final report approved and ready to come to you folks. So I have it in time to put the budget together for that next calendar year.
I also think that when we look at our CIP, we look at our forms, nowhere on the form is to say when the project needs to be completed. It says when you want to start. Now, if it's 10, 15 years down the road of completion, we should know that, because it's up to us to decide. Ultimately, we're the ones that have to figure out where the money's gonna come from to pay for these projects. That should also be a part of the CIP process as to how do they think they're gonna get the money to it. I mean, it's not like throwing out $2 million for the project and say, I want it, now you guys figure out how you're gonna pay for it. It can't work that way.
No, that's a great point, Dan. I think it's gotta come to us, but we have to put the definitions out there. We have to say, this is what goes in the CIP, this is what the information we need in there. It's timeframes, it's start and end dates, it's where the money's coming from. That's an administrative function. The planning commission vets it to make sure that it works with land use and master plan goals and objectives. By the time it comes to us, it probably is something that we've all agreed on and we're ready to move forward on it. But in the current format, it hasn't been.
Trustee Blanco, to your point, the supervisor, Leamington and I have had numerous discussions about this over the last several budget cycles. And I think one of the things that would help you immensely, and we are doing it in 2015, we see the format, using Perkins, for instance, in the city, you should speak to the can. When he puts his narrative together, basically, it says, I'm putting $50,000 in towards this, and $30,000 towards that, and this, that, and the other thing. Our budget format needs to be able to track that focus. So when you look at the budget itself, the budget document, the actual numbers, there's an indication in there that we're in year 5 of year 8, an 8-year process to fund this project. Yeah, so you have that in your budget cycle, so it gives you an idea where you're at, and then when you look at the budget, and you make your budgetary decisions, let's assume that you're in year 5 of an 8-year cycle to get the whole budget project, and in that year, something unexpected occurs. You can then look at that budget, and working with Kurt, or using him as an example, working with him, you can then go back in and reprioritize the projects that you got in the budget, and take a formal action that would be tagged in the budget that as of this year, you've suspended that contribution. So year 5 isn't going to be funded this year. This is going to be funded in place of it, so then you have a track from year to year on where you've made those changes.
I think if you go back to our budget session this year, that's what we're looking for. I think that's what Lynn and I talked about, the fact that, okay, we're in the 3rd year, there should be X amount of money here, but there isn't. Where did it go? And then, well, we needed it from here. Well, this is where we ran into that problem of prioritizing and saying, no, it has to, you have to finish this project next year. We can't take that money out of that. You're going to have to find someplace else to take it from, or whatever. Or, that's just the kind of thing I think that we need to do. I think it shows us due diligence in how our money is being spent, and I think this is a good step towards that goal.
And that's a link that you don't currently have. If you had that link, you could look at it and you could then track from cycle to cycle what happened on each of those projects and how much you might. Now, with a good year, let's say Duke Light Point builds here in Marquette Township, and you have an influx of $300 million worth of construction money. You're not going to get that. You're only going to get 4.9 mils of that for your operations, but you could then earmark from that increase in revenue that year that you're going to go back and replace those funds that you didn't do previously. Take a formal action. The link that you don't have right now is the board takes an action at every meeting to modify the budget, basically for budget amendments, but there's no single document that tracks all of those.
Right.
And if you had that kind of documentation in front of you, you could look at it and answer those questions pretty easily.
Ready?
I think like a lot of these things, what's the status of these? Where they're at? Are we completed? Are we 10%? Or are we in the 4th year of it and that? And along with the dollars net, we know at this year we're 40%, which means we have to allocate X number of dollars this year to meet that.
Specifically the stuff in the CIP
Right now, and that too, so. But you're looking towards the future, because if you're projecting this out into the future, they may not be able to come with anything big in the CIP because the dollars may not be there.
Right.
Because you've already allocated into the future X number of dollars you have to pull out of the budget for these projects. So there's things like this here you have to be concerned with.
Right.
And that is the situation that Kirk has with Public Works, is that he's got water and wastewater and solid waste to some extent built on a 25-year cycle.
Right.
We're projecting out 25 years because that's what you have to do for DEQ, to demonstrate that you have the capability to serve your future anticipated need now. And with that basically comes definition of where those funds are going to come from, so they can be built into the budget as projections, but they would have to be identified as projections. The state has to follow through on those.
And I also think from the standpoint of the citizens out there, they can look at the restricted funds and they'll see exactly where the restricted fund money is earmarked, rather than just one big lump sum of, you have $6 million in restricted funds. This is the allocation of that $6 million.
And then your ordinance is your backup as to why it's there.
Yep.
And a good example of making our plan work and make sure we have the money for it, we're sitting in it tonight, and across the street, the fire department, the warehouse, like, due diligence, make sure we fund it, get our eye on the ball, and follow through. I mean, so many rewards from this, just the office part. The fire department's got a lot of too, but just to give them the real office so they can be more efficient and stuff like that. So we are experiencing it right now, some of our planning and what happens, what we do.
Right. So we don't need a motion or anything, it's just, I wanted to raise it, I think that it was excellent discussion, I think that we realize that we have some room for improvement, there's ways to do things differently that will help us move, and, you know, I always say it, what's gonna be our legacy when we're gone and someone else is sitting in these seats, and if we can fine tune some of these things so that our legacy is we left it a heck of a lot better than what we found it as, we get a great service to the community, and this is one of those ways of doing that, is be able to find items like this, help formalize that process, and so that when the next person who sits in your seat doesn't have to go through as many trials and tribulations as we did, they get a better understanding of how all of our long-range and short-range plans are tied together and why they have to be. But it will be revisited as an ongoing, I think you'll see something on the agenda for the next, at least for the next several months. The next item on our agenda is 10B, continued discussion of the 2014.
If I may, I'm sure that Mr. Clark and Mr. Hall and Kirk are really interested in this next item, but could we move their item up so they could get that taken care of, their 10 or 11B? Could we do that up to this point and let them get moving tonight?
Randy, you want to make the motion?
Second.
Yeah, I'll move that we move 11B to 10B
Why don't we just push 10B
down.
down to 11E, and that way we can get to it.
Can do that too. So I'll move that we, so I didn't get support on this motion. I know Pete's a part of it. I'll move that we move 11B to where 10B is and use the 10B and put it down on the bottom of the business after the manager's report.
Second.
Why don't we just move it to 11E? I don't think it only take a second to do the deputy clerk motion.
Yeah, we can move it to 11B. 10B, we'll just switch spots, how's that sound? I guess that's easier.
Switch 11B and 10B?
Yeah, how's
Right.
that sound?
That's fine.
Is that okay with you, Pete?
Yes.
Trustee Room, okay.
All in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Clark? And Mr. Hall? Floor is yours.
Thank you, board members. First of all, I just want to say that we were going to include a construction update on it, so I'm going to turn the podium over to Bromley Hall, and he can give you a construction update. There are some significant climatic things that, you know, the polar vortex has affected our schedule, and Bromley can detail that, and then we'll close our discussion with analyzing the building at grade.
Well, as Jim said, I realize I spoke a little bit too soon in the last update about being over the weather. Didn't really anticipate this polar vortex to settle in over us and then give us enough time to complete the membrane roof, which has really affected us in a sense that we haven't, you know, obviously been able to get any heat into the addition side to be able to get the frost out and move forward into underground utilities and you know, eventually into the concrete slab. As I mentioned in the last meeting, I think it was a day or two prior, that Bell Roofing had come in to start the installation of the membrane roof. They have not yet been able to complete that. We're probably about a day and a half away from that, once we can get favorable conditions for that. It's been a tough one, very, very frustrating from my position, but at the same point, you know, we've discussed this with Randy and Kirk. It's not a thing that we want to push. It's a fully adhered system. We want to have a minimum low temperature of 24 hours of 10 degrees. We also can't have any snow. We've had some days in between that where we've had those minimum requirements met, but we've had snow on those days. Being that the membrane is a fully adhered system, which is glued, if that insulation gets wet, we take a chance at that adhesion not being completely what we want. So it's a thing where we basically have just kind of been forced to sit on our hands. You know. It's frustrating as it is. We have been able to make a fair amount of headway on the interior. Unfortunately, that's not in the critical path for the completion date. The last update meeting that we had with Randy and Kirk, the schedule has been affected by about 2 weeks overall. And as it sits right now, owner occupancy is 415. So we've taken a couple of week hit there. And we hope basically that these temperatures will. As of this schedule right now, the date on here for the completion of the work, the revised schedule, which shows us at 14th, shows 28th of January completion date for the roof. With the forecast, it looks like we should be able to get that. I'm hopeful. And barring not having 4 feet of frost inside of it, I think we can get it. Just keep in mind that there are still some variables that could touch the schedule a little bit. We've completed all the interior demolition, done a fair portion of the underground plumbing. Electrical demolition's been completed. We've worked on the corrections on all the trench drains. A lot of issues with those, with the weight of the fire trucks over the years along those trench drains. So it's not that things have been dormant. It's just we've been hitting things, as I said, unfortunately, that don't fall directly into the critical path.
Any questions for him from all guys? Being none? Jim, anything to add?
Well, the positive side, we've not incurred the expenses that we expected to incur from that standpoint. But, Brownlee and I and Kirk and Jim have been working pretty closely with this process, identifying what can be done based on the weather, and we've been shifting gears basically to do that work to continue the project moving forward with as minimal impact on the schedule as possible. But as Brownlee mentioned, for the roofing system, which is critical to be able to finish the interior of the new addition, we've not been able to get the temperature that's necessary. It has to be at least 10 degrees with no snow, no moisture basically. So we've had freezing rain, we've had snow, we've had sub-zero temperatures. So we're hoping here that we'll get a break for a couple of days here in the next couple of weeks. Now we've got another cold spell snap coming through this week, but the forecast going into next week is going to be a little more moderate. So we're hoping we won't have the snow along with the moderate temperatures, so we get the roofing completed. You're seeing the most of the sheeting basically is going to be the exterior sheeting on the addition is what, this week?
Yeah, they're about 50%, pretty close to 50%.
So the exterior wall sheeting should be completed this week. Once we get that roof on, then we can get in there and get as Brownlee mentioned, get heat into that addition portion of it, with frost out of the ground, so we can get the subsurface work on there.
The only thing I'd like to clarify is this occupancy date is when the building will be completed. There will be construction activities after April 15th that are mainly waiting for to do the final blacktopping, things that require that we get into spring weather conditions. We have to wait for the blacktop plant to open, those types of things. So we will have to do some choreography and scheduling with Kirk's staff to make sure that any critical vehicles they will need access to won't be inhibited by our construction activities. So we'll have to do some coordination so that we won't have any conflicts with one another. But we're going to do our best. It's been working very smooth between Kirk and ours and all contracted. Haven't had any problems. The only final issue that I have is we also submitted progress building number 14, which is actually number 3 for the Public Works building. for the amount of $121,010.53. Those, that billing includes demolition, which Brownlee touched on, winter condition activities. All the structural steel now is completed, and that is both for, as well as the structural steel supply. And some electrical issues that we need to do as far as demolition and some of the stuff we need to do on the original building, floor plan changes. And I'm available, open for questions.
Thanks, Jim. Anyone have any questions for Jim before we move to payment? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the payment request number 3 or progress billing number 14, depending on how you look at it, the amount of $121,010.53.
I'll make the motion.
So we're jumping ahead to 11B now, being that in.
Yes, we jumped to 11B. We swapped out 10B for 11B. If there's no other comment, do a motion and support to approve the total not due of $121,010.53. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. Thanks, gentlemen.
The only final comment that I have to make on this is that Supervisor Leavitt and Clerk Rotary signed off the final documents, final financing documents this afternoon. We have access to the fund, and we'll be replacing these funds back into the public works fund.
Thanks, Randy. Next item on our agenda is 11A, consider authorization for former deputy clerk to sign the minutes. Clerk Rotary?
Yeah, a few months back, I was looking through our minutes book, and there's a couple sets of minutes from 2009 that were not signed by the clerk at the time. And now that clerk mayor is no longer, a member of the board. And so I talked to legal about that, and the deputy clerk has the authorization to sign that, and that deputy clerk was me at the time. So I'm just coming to the board, just to affirm that that you authorized me to sign those minutes. They were board approved, but they just need a signature, and that's why I'm coming to you, just to affirm that.
Everybody understands that correctly?
You were the deputy clerk at the time, so.
I was, yeah, and I probably could sign them without board approval, but I'm coming to you just to affirm it and that it's in the minutes.
So is there a motion to authorize the secretary to sign the minutes from our prior clerk?
Yeah, and the minutes of the meetings were 10/20/09 and 10/29/09. Those were the meetings that were not signed.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and support, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes, thank you.
What date will you put then? Will you put today's, tomorrow's date? Signing?
Yeah, I'll check with legal about that, about re-signing or signing those, and see if I have to put a notation about that. I will check, but it'll be done correctly.
Next item on our agenda is the former 10B, continued discussion of 2014 managers' goals and objectives. We did receive just about everybody's in for the proposed 2014 goals and objectives. Of course, we've had Manager Gerard's for a couple of months, combined with everybody else's. As we began the conversation, remember we want to get it somewhere between 3 to 5 goals to give him for 2014. And remember that the goals generally are the 10,000-foot view. It's what we want him to work on. The strategies and tactics are how he achieves those goals. So as we prepare our goals, we want to make sure that we've made them broad-based enough that it's a goal statement and what we want done, not how we want it done necessarily. But certainly you can put time frames in there to make it measurable and specific. We did receive everybody's except Diana's, so I thought I would open it up with Diana and let her share her thoughts on what 3 to 5 goals Manager Gerard, in your opinion, should be working on in the next 12 months.
On mine, I just kind of I had something like Pete had road repairs, and different ones from the same as some of the other ones. But, I had, like Pete had wrote about a grant writer and stuff, I thought that was a good one. And overtime ideas, that was a good one too, I liked.
Okay, roads, grant writer, overtime.
And what was the other one? Funding and, grants along with the grant writer, because that way we could go for some funds for, other stuff out there, not just, like racks, roads, whatever we could, with a writer, I think we might be able to get a little bit more.
Okay,
But they all had pretty good ones.
thanks, Dan. I looked at Manager Gerard's, and he had 6 out there, and kind of, as I went through everybody's, I was kind of looking and trying to see how many of them were similar, or lumped in the same categories. You know, with Randy's, you look at like construction, dealing with revenue, personnel, public works, and professional development. Ernie had some in there with training and budgeting or revenue process. Ernie's also got some in there in regards to information technology. Lynn, again, had something with revenue, so you're seeing you see the budget of revenue, you're starting to see a pattern of who's concerned with what, and it seems like a lot of us with revenue. Lynn also had in there about training and professional development. Ernie had as well training, and I think that we can lump those into a personnel type goal. If you look at Pete's, he had also training, public works, construction, professional development. Look at mine, it was facilities construction, personnel or training, revenue, professional development. Dan's, again, revenue, public works, with completion of, or discussion of a joint water authority, again with training or with personnel department from Dan. And so I think that we start to narrow it down somewhat, and same thing with Randy's. We had public works, revenue, training, training for staff, and then completion of the water system. So our broad-based goals really are coming into a few buckets, and I think we're concerned with the construction of the public works facilities, number one. We certainly are concerned as a board with the revenue stream and making sure we maintain it, especially with the challenges before us with the tax tribunal. And I think that's a common theme. Personnel is a very common theme amongst the majority of us. From the fire officer training curriculum that Manager Gerard and a couple of others had noted, to our personnel manuals and the operations manual for the fire department, I think are key. There were a mixed bag when it comes to the water system and where we're going with that, although it was certainly shown up in more than half of what we received. And professional development was on almost everybody, so I think, again, another key area. Definitely revenue, personnel, construction, and professional development appeared to be the top 4 responses. And then the public works varying interests in what we're going to do with the water project, like Manager Gerard had proposed. So I guess I'd start, we've got Randy's, and maybe take a look at his, combine those with what other people's comments were, and see if we are in an area where we can agree that we're kind of moving in the right direction. If you look at Randy's first one, it had to do with the construction, complete the conversion of the former fire rescue hall to public works and transition of services, meaning projected occupancy by March 28th. it would be my guess that Manager Dwyer would like to revise that date based upon what he heard a few moments ago.
Yeah, maybe.
Uh,
I don't know, I think our occupancy by March 28th is still out of the question. You know, occupancy doesn't necessarily mean fully functional, but maybe we could get out of the temporary garage that we currently have and get out of, you know, some of the storage space to avoid costs. So, you know, it's still, I think, some occupancy by the 28th is really still realistic.
You want to leave the date, that's okay with me. I want to know how the board feels, and then one other thing that I think that should probably be added to that, it came up in a couple of different ones, was the completion of the sale of the former Hall and Public Works garage, and that should be tied into that conversion
It is,
as a goal.
and that, the garage portion of it certainly is tied to that. We can't be shedding that until we're ready to vacate that and move it into a new facility. So again, I'm looking at March for that portion of it as well.
Would you be amenable to having a goal set out that, in light of what you had put in there, the conversion of the former rescue fire hall and transition of services, meeting projected occupancy by March 28th, or I think we should probably put it, to be honest with you, as April 15th. And then put in there something about including completion of sale of the former hall and garage.
Sure, because those two things are gonna coincide. Transfer of the garage. We're certainly not waiting, until that's completed to transfer the remainder of the property, so.
Would the board be comfortable with that as a goal?
What would, my staff has been talking lately about consequences, so what would the consequences be if it ended up being June 1st or something? Does it make a difference to have a date in there?
What?
If it's a yearly goal?
No, that would be addressed in my performance evaluation.
Right. Failure to meet goals.
Yeah, but that may not have, he may not be able to control it.
Yeah.
And then,
That's the problem there.
but then you would rate him on that accordingly.
Yeah, but again, that's, you know, your avenue to address that would be performance evaluations, and, you know, which is not going to be very far behind that.
If you don't put a date in it and he completes it on December 31st, then he completed his goals.
Yeah, it's a target. And I think that's a realistic target. I mean, you know, we're still talking with the owners, you know, new owners about the actual transition date. They understand they've got some issues, we've got some issues in terms of that transition date, so.
Looks like consensus-wise, everyone's kind of comfortable with that as a goal for Randy. One of the second ones was revenue that I identified everywhere. Randy has it in there about contacting the 83 county boards and doing that. I look at that as more of a strategy or a tactic with an overall goal being more, the way I worded it was stabilize effects to revenue stream, responsive to challenges of the tax tribunal, and proactively pursue additional legal defense funding from all available sources.
Well, and I'm actually looking at other sources for funding to try and wean us off of revenue sharing, state revenue sharing. Still predicting it's going to be reducing as we move forward.
But I think that you heard enough about a grant writer in several responses across the boards. I think that grant writing could fall into two categories that were kind of highlighted. One is professional development, and it would give you the opportunity to, they offer those throughout the year, additional opportunities for learning experiences in grant writing. And I don't know if that's something that you would want as a goal or want to pursue, or if you think that it should be something that a member of your staff should be pursuing. But the goal is, we'd like to see us to be more aggressive in grant opportunities.
From the standpoint of stabilizing the budget, grants are generally one-time events. And, you know, from that standpoint, I look at grants as more project-oriented, and, you know, I would look to Janelle and Jason to be more involved with the grant aspect of it for recreational projects, for property code enforcement grants, community development block grants, those kinds of things. that are from more project oriented, but I'm trying to focus on our new revenue streams. Something that will be continuing revenues and mechanisms that we will be able to access exterior funds on more of a regular, reliable basis to stabilize the budget. For instance, maybe one of the things that has been employed in other communities is you do a fee study, basically. What are the appropriate levels of fees for the various services that the township provides that we don't necessarily have revenue from currently? Those kinds of things. So those are the kinds of revenue streams that would be continuous, that would offset somewhat. We get about $230,000 to $235,000 a year of revenue sharing right now. Governor Snyder's not going to be able to keep that up for very long. Sales taxes keep going down. People are still buying more and more on the internet. He's giving away property tax and chipping away at our tax base. I think we need to wean ourselves off of the state and possibly give some of our functions back to the state and let them do it.
Okay, so from a goal standpoint, Ernie?
On grant writing, as you said, you're identifying projects that you're looking for. Some of the organizations I've belonged to now and in the past, when they looked at grant writing, they felt that they could not sustain someone with enough background to do the grant writing that they felt was necessary. So they went to the outside, got someone in that had the background, was familiar with writing grants for these specific projects, and that and found it was cheaper because these people had the knowledge and the context. So that may be something to think about too in some of these projects.
And they generally take on a grant project for a percentage.
Right.
They take a percentage of the grant and administrative fee, if you will.
But it may be cheaper that way than to have our people being allocated their time to do something like that.
That's true, but what my thought was in terms of things like, that are on our agenda, like development of trailhead, trailhead number 8 or 9, or whatever else it turns out to be. That's something that we're doing internally that our folk, Mike Springer and Jason, that are working on an RTF grant, basically, to do that. They need to have access to information that an external grant writer wouldn't have. But, for instance, for external grants, Lions Field. We could engage a grant writer basically to go out and chase things that would be out there for ball fields, for city parks, for ice rinks, and things like that, and let them go out and find those for a percentage of what they usually it's 10%, that they typically take out of the grant proceeds, it's their fee for doing it. If they don't perform, they don't get paid. So, that's the benefit. On that side, they have a real impetus to get out and try and find something. And Kellogg Foods has a whole bunch of grants. Nike has grants. They're generally small, but if you package 4 or 5 of them together, you're talking $10,000, $15,000, $20,000.
But rather than, what I would like to do, just to stay on this, that is, from a grant opportunity standpoint, it's identified by many board members. So I think that, you're right, maybe it doesn't belong in that revenue goal. Revenue was a big one, but personnel and training was a very big one that was very common amongst board members. So maybe the grant opportunities ends up being in that personnel/training goal, because they both kind of tie to personnel. And whether, however you want to work those grant opportunities, what we're asking you for is some strategies and tactics on how you're going to go after more of them, and you can provide us with that when you give us your report on the goals and objectives. Once we've identified what our goals are, you come back and report to us on your strategies for getting it done.
One of the objectives could be to develop a program for seeking and securing external funding for projects.
Sure.
And that could be one. There could be a standalone one by itself, separate from the budget.
So, first, let me get consensus on the revenue. Do we all agree that revenue, stabilizing revenue is a goal for the manager, and he will report back to us on strategies and tactics, how he plans on doing that?
That may be very difficult to do.
It may be.
Come down to it.
Okay, so we have one that would be completion of facilities, including sale, as a goal. The second one is about maintaining revenue, and they'll provide strategies and tactics on how this is going to happen. The third one then will go into personnel. A lot of things came up. It was the development, Randy's got the development and initial implementation of the fire officer training curriculum, as well as several people mentioned the updates to personnel manuals for Q1, the fire department manual, the personnel manual, the personnel committee. So again, a lot of those came up. Can we develop a goal that talks about those personnel issues? Number one, it's the training of making sure that all staff is up to date on training and that the board mandated fire officer training curriculum is in place and being adhered to. And tie in with personnel, the completion of the manuals within Q1 of 2014, including putting the personnel committee together for the personnel manual and then the fire department operations manual, and then tie something else into that goal along with the training is about the grant opportunities, whether he pursues them or he has additional staff pursue them or he gets grant writers, but we'll put it under personnel and training because it's up to him to decide how it's going to get done. If he wants Jason and Janelle to pursue it, great. If he wants to pursue it himself, if he wants to get a grant writer for special projects, it doesn't matter to us. We just want to see it as a goal. Dan?
Well, and I agree that that's a great goal, but unfortunately, that was also a goal. That was also his goal in 2013. That exact same thing. We've heard back and forth that this appears a labor council. Labor council is called. If this isn't in fact the truth, then maybe we need to have the labor council in here our next meeting and find out why this has been sitting in his desk for so long. I know the fire department one alone has been over 2 years, and the last time we did a personnel upgrade on the personnel committee was 2008. So. I agree that this is an important thing, but again, like I said, it wasn't part of the 2013 goals, so it's...
Right, and it didn't get done.
It didn't get done. And as well as, and I understand this, the problem with the garage, but part of the goal was to, by the 31st of December of last year, have all the property sold. And we haven't really heard any, Brandon Gerard made comment that and he said that the new owner, we really don't have an owner until the board accepts the final thing. So, I mean, those are things that, somebody asked me the other day and I couldn't answer them. Was our property put out there for the general public under allow anybody, or do we just take one person and just go with that? I really don't know. I don't have the answer for that. So, but again, these are projects that were last year's, so I just want to bring that up. We could basically take that same goal from last year and add it to this year because it's basically exactly what you just got to say.
So that's why I think it's important that we put in actual time frames of like it's done in Q1. And then it's up to Randy to come back with us. If we submit these to him, I would expect that the following meeting they would come back with his strategies and tactics, how he's going to meet those time frames that we placed in his goals. So as a goal, and I'll have to do a little wordsmith clearly, but between what we had in there last year, may be able to, maybe can proactively complete all personnel requirements. Last year we had in there to include the employee annual evaluations. We want those to continue. We want the training requirements for all employees, including fire department officers, etc. And the updates completed and presented to the board for the personnel manuals and fire department operation manuals within Q1 of 2014. And I think there's a lot in there, including with the grant opportunities, but it's about training, it's about some of the things that we absolutely have to have done, and we want it done in Q1 as a board. And I think it's like I said, how Randy gets there, gets it done, it'll be interesting to see his strategies and tactics for, but that's, you get that right, Randy? I mean, it's a goal you can agree to? Sure. Okay. The next one that had that had seemed to have a general consensus was professional development. And I would suggest that we make that goal number 4. He identified opportunities, including the MTA meeting, the placemaking objectives, opportunities, community development, enhancement, community infrastructure, maintenance planning as some of the areas where he has developmental interests or needs and to pursue. Anybody that had anything, kind of looking at everybody's here real quick, that had anything else on it, I don't know if there's anything specific that you would like to specifically put in there for him in a direction. You know, like I said, we could even put in grant opportunities under this one as well, depending on where his strategies and tactics go to find it. But I think we agree, the majority consensus on professional development. That makes number 4, and Randy had 6, like I said, at 3 to 5, I think are generally good. I mean, we can put in as many as we need. The other one that had a lot, Randy's got it in here, it has to do with public works, completion, update design, engineering, and cost projection for completion of phase 2 of the township municipal water system. Completion contingent upon attaining outside financial partnerships. That was a goal he had put in there. Several people had in here in regards to, say, Dan's, was it? Yeah. Enter a discussion with surrounding municipalities concerning perhaps joint water authority. Lynn mentions that maybe that's projects or more projects than goal-oriented. You know, Pete had something in on his. So, is it a goal that we, as a board, want him to pursue public works? I mean, we've got it in our master plan that we're moving forward. I think that we have a subdivision hanging out there that is probably phase 1 of the phase 2. I mean, you have to. Mason's Bluff is probably more critical to put on board as a juncture, but, you know, is it a project or is it a goal? Are we going to ask him as a manager that that's the high priority goal for us for him to accomplish in 2014?
Well, I look at it as a project for the board. Is that the direction the board wants to go in that, rather than letting a manager undertake it? If that's the direction that the board want to go and that's a project we want, then we can design it as that and move forward on it. That's the way I'm looking at it too, rather than a goal for himself. I think it's a goal for the board. If that's the direction we want to go, we're going to go. If not,
anyone else? Dan?
I think when I brought mine up, I was also considering the fact that, you know, we keep forgetting about the north of us, 550. I know way back when we discussed the well project, I know it was thrown around with the idea of our own water treatment facility, since we do have the unlimited access to the lake and to a property on the lake, that we could possibly build a water treatment plant. And that's where I was looking from the standpoint that gives us easy access for water. Now anything north of here, which there is some subdevelopments going on in that area also, that seems to be a lot more area developed in, well, they're both areas, but I mean, and that's why I was looking from the standpoint of joint water authority with the existing townships in the area. Basically, like I said, with Lake Superior giving us unlimited supply of water, perhaps everybody kicking in and having their own authority will save us a lot of money, as well as grant projects, as well as the governor's idea of working with between inner cities and inner townships. I think it's a perfect opportunity for us to perhaps pursue this line of thinking.
Good. Anyone else? I mean, remember, as a goal, we can make it as broad-based as we want. It may be, I mean, we're all concerned and asking for more information. We're not sure how to proceed with completion of the water system. There's no problem with making it a goal that we want to have the manager provide us with an update certainly before the budget session, so by July 1 of 2014, that he brings to the board a report in regards to expansion of our water system, whether that be through phase 2 groundwater or joint water authority and allow him to provide us with all of the available options and associated costs and feasibility of each one.
And maybe what Ernie said is true, though, maybe that is a big goal for him. Maybe that should be a board goal where our supervisor works with the other townships to discuss this. Maybe for a manager's, that would be a pretty lofty goal to accomplish. And I think maybe a face-to-face with other boards would be a better way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we want to know. Is it a goal for him? Is it, how do we, it was noted in a lot of board members' comments, so that was why I wanted to make sure, do we see that as a goal? Right now, we have 4 goals for him. And do we see it as one that's a consensus for the board? Pete, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking about, we have wells up there, what's the cost of finishing up that, and also checking with the, like Danny said, about the water base barrier. We have wells now, we have them out there. We have a need for some expansion, and we want our township to grow. And what's the cost of it? Let's finish up what we got, and keep the other one in the headlights.
So is it something that we feel is important enough for the manager to, that we specifically spell it out for him, that this is the information or what we're looking for?
I think that's where the information is coming from. And he has the resources of all that. It's not saying that we don't get involved in it, and you don't get involved with the different townships. And I think after he comes back with some of the costs and how what we can do and time frames and stuff like that, I think it's very important. But we started before, it's in the ground now, and we got them, so use them.
Yeah.
I would say that would be more of a joint, maybe a joint goal, to assist the board in pursuing this rather than thinking about it.
Are we just talking about trying to come up with some cost projections for that total project then?
Well, I'd like to see us move ahead, even if it's with the city, to get into a joint water authority, so we don't have this constant problem with this water.
I mean, Randy mentioned it, Dan mentioned it in his goals. I mean, it's one of those things that, I mean, it's certainly a good goal, and again, when we talk about it, we're not necessarily getting down to nuts and bolts. We're staying up at 1,000 feet saying, here's a goal, Randy, no. But we have to make it specific and achievable enough to where he knows what he's working on, not just kind of a broad-based thing. And if we specifically say, we explore, prepare, and bring back recommendations to the board by July 1 of 2014, 2 things that joint water authority discussions amongst neighboring municipalities, as well as completion. It provides us with the information we're looking for, and it doesn't mean this is an exploration phase, but it's saying to Randy that, hey, this is important enough that the board supports that as a goal. It's one of the goals, and we'd like to see your tactics and strategies and how you're going to provide us with the information that we need to make informed decisions. But,
What, if that were my goal and I had to try to do some research on it, part of all the water assets we have on 492 wouldn't be so bad, because you could tap into, pardon the pun, the information we had from the first project and how much more that would cost and what we've already got invested in, that kind of thing. The water authority, other than setting up some meetings, joint meetings or individual meetings with you two and some of the other leaders, but even that, where would that go? I mean, or how could you even start that if would you have the water authority focus on what we have on 492 and using that going forward? Because trying to project, at one point, I guess, there was a dollar figure for taking water out of the northeast side of the township.
right.
So updating that with maybe more current numbers, it just seems like such a broad goal with so many facets that how would he put it together?
Well, from our standpoint, if we say, Randy, here's your goal, and it is to, initiate pursuit of the joint water authority discussion with neighboring municipalities and report back to the board by end of Q2 2014. And in combination, it is provide update to the board on the cost and feasibility of completion of the water project. I mean, it's broad-based because it should be, and then he comes back the first time after he takes this, he's gonna bring back to us strategies and tactics and say, we'll give him a month to put it together, and he'll report to us, and he'll say, here's what I've got 5 goals, here's my strategies and tactics for accomplishing the 5 goals that you have given me for 2014. If we don't like what he's put in there, that's our opportunity to say, actually, we're thinking more like this, and you can refine it, refine the goal. But I think the way Randy had put it into 2, and I think it's about providing us with the information we need, because he even has in there, completion contingent upon obtaining outside financial partnerships. He's not proposing to complete phase 2 of the water project. He's saying, let's update all the information and present that so the board can make a knowledgeable decision about that. And he's also saying at the same time, let's initiate this joint water authority discussions. I think we can combine them because they're both about, what direction are we going to take in completion of our water project? Are we moving forward with phase 2, or should we be looking towards joint authority? We're really asking him to provide us with direction by July 1. I'd kind of like to have it before we get into budget talks, is my point.
And one overlaps the other. If we could actually get a joint water authority, then our cash flow is now broken down between the group of us, rather than just all coming back to us.
Right.
That makes it a lot easier to look at.
Yeah, well, then again, it depends on how the water authority will be developed. Excuse me, what I proposed in my wording, basically, number 4 and number 5. Number 4, we already have on the shelf, we've got phase 2 on the shelf, we've got connecting to the lake on the shelf. We have figures that were done 5-6 years ago. What I'm proposing is to update those figures to see what the cost of those projects independent would be. As Dan mentioned, going to the lake with a filtration plant either for us individually to serve possibly just the north part of the township. I don't think it's feasible for us to go to the lake to serve the entire township because we have to cross city property to get here. We don't have to cross city property to serve 550 north. We just have to get through 550 for the piping along the right of way. So a small individual plant there could solve it. There isn't really any groundwater there to speak of, we know that. So it would have to be something from the lake, which would be a full-blown filtration plant because it's surface water. Okay. The second part of it, with regard to phase 2 of the water project, the test wells are in the ground. We've got a design for the system with the pump station and the piping to come back to the Chapel Ridge tank, basically, to get to the Cox tank, to then give us the ability to serve Trowbridge, which as of right now, you just saw the report, 2012 we bought almost 61 million gallons of water from the city. 2013 we bought 57 million gallons. Multiply that out. I mean, we're paying around $100,000 a year to buy water from the city that we would no longer have to buy if we completed phase 2. Because we'd be serving Trowbridge from the well system. We'd be serving the entire township from the well system. So that would rely on a partnership with the owner, which right now is the Capital Credit Union, is the owner of Mason's Bluff. They've taken it back on bankruptcy, so there would be a financial partner in that process, as well as some developer who's going to develop Mason's Bluff would also be a financial partner in that process. And that would be, what I'm talking about there is looking at how would all of that come together, what kind of time frame would come together, and how would that cost share be determined for completing phase 2. The Water Authority basically would be talking with the communities to the west primarily. We're already connected to the city, so we already have a joint authority with them basically with our current agreement, which is a perpetual agreement, however much water we choose to purchase from the city, whether it's more or less or the same. But going west, if we complete phase 2 of the project, we're less than 7 miles from Nagani's well. So that could be a connection along 492. They're connected to the city of Nagani. They can then connect to the city of Ishpeming. We could then connect to Ishpeming Township. I mean, it could be a joint water authority based on well fields. Each of those communities have either surface water access or well access. So that would be, that's the kind of an authority that I'd be talking about, which could ultimately connect all the way to the city of Marquette as redundancy for all of us, redundancy for the city of Marquette if they have an issue where at some point their intake is not available, whether it's contamination in the lake or whether it's a failure of the system or whatever, we could backfeed well water from all of these other sources back to the city. Same thing, if somebody along the lines well system failed for some reason or was contaminated or whatever, we could isolate that to provide a flow to them, basically. So that's the way I view an authority there, in terms of being a reciprocal type of a redundant system that has access directly to the lake or has access to well field.
So from a goal standpoint though, Randy,
The goal objective that I had built there for 2014 was to do that exploration, to get those two systems updated in terms of cost and contact, make the initial contacts with the other communities to see, hey, if they're even interested in forming an authority. I know some of them are having difficulties with their well systems. Some of them are questioning whether they're going to be able to continue to acquire their water from their well fields, and we have to look at some other alternatives.
okay, so it's hard to combine them then the way Randy's talking, right? I mean, are we willing to, we've got 1 through 4, are we willing to have him have 6 goals and kind of still work those along the lines of?
4 and 5 could be combined into one. It would be basically to look at all of our options for potential water. And, that would be completing phase 2, that would be looking to the lake, and those would be, you're working mainly with the engineers to update those costs, primarily, is that project. But then the discussions with the other communities would be the discussion about potentially forming an authority of some sort and what we would be willing to participate in. And there may be some political discussion there as well, the supervisor, the mayor, the other supervisors, whatever, but the initial contacts would be, here's the potential, are you interested in pursuing it at all? Previously, some of them were not. They had just sunk much money into their own systems.
How are we as a board if we know we have the 4, if we make this the 5th goal, it has to do with completion of the water system as a 5th goal, and it's either going to be the 5th and 6th goal, or it'll be the 5th goal, but either way, we want the information on both, and it seems like it's kind of a consensus from the board that it is the information that we're interested in having him achieve this year. Ernie?
When you talk about updating design engineering update design engineering, you're talking about dollar amounts there, because you're gonna have to go back to the firm to do that. So some of those costs are gonna have to come to us before anything is even done, to see which direction we wanna go, if we wanna even move there, and how fast we wanna move.
That's part of it. Part of it would be to pull those projects back off the shelf, and some of them are 4 or 5 years old, so they have to be updated with current construction costs, updated with current, with current factoring, basically, in terms of costs. Primarily a cost study. So the PERC does periodically with his future studies that increase the cost, update them. So you know exactly what you're talking about. You may look at it and say, oh, cow, we're not doing that. I mean, it's very possible, but at least they would be updated at this point. So if let's assume the DBQ comes out with a new project, an SRF plan at 2% for 20 years. You might want to look at something like that if you get that kind of interest rate.
So as a consensus, what I'm curious is, as consensus, can we agree that those are the goals that we want him to pursue? I'll rewrite them and send them out to the board this week to make sure that I capture it appropriately.
Are you can combine 4 and 5?
I think so, as long as I can word it appropriately. And then we'll have 5 goals to work on for this year. We'll put specific timeframes in. And I said then you can make it specific and achievable, and that way he's held accountable. If he doesn't achieve the timeframes through fault of his, not through some act of God, then you hold him accountable as performance appraisal.
Yeah, I guess we could probably make this a draft and then finalize it for the next meeting, and Mr.
Right.
approve it, and then I'll put it in the minutes, so it's tracked.
But I think in going through everything that people wrote up, there's a lot of directions that they're saying, and a lot of things we should be considering, both now and into the future. How do we address some of the items that are here too? Is that something we we as a board are gonna have to look at.
And some of those, Ernie, I agree, some of the things that we put in there are more, they're detail-oriented, project or policy-oriented versus goal-oriented, right? I mean, it's really a policy thing. Some of this, a lot of the stuff when you read through here is policy-oriented. So if we need a policy to address some of those, then the board needs to set policy on that to move forward.
Yeah, I just want to explain why I put down grant writer on mine is just because we have so much going for us. And, you know, all of the importance of someone from the staff doing grants or go to the outside. We don't want to stop the momentum that we have now.
Staff goes pretty stretched.
Yeah, they are. They are right now because we're talking about different things in the recreation and, you know, you can just see Jason cringe a little bit. Because we are adding a lot of stuff on him. He's doing great things with the equipment that we bought from before for the planning and that. He's doing great things. And that's why my question was for the
It's
grant
not
writer.
just the things that are in the hopper, but I mean, things like these lights, like they have us, we're spending a lot of time looking at potential options and how can we make ourselves more attractive to those kinds of developments. And what is it we're looking for, what do we need to provide for them? So the staff is stretched pretty thin. I mean, you know, grant writing is something that occupies a fair amount of time, you know, and it would likely be an external resource. It wouldn't be something we would do in-house, with the exception of recreation.
Can we accept these 5 goals as a draft? And I'll, like I said, I'll rewrite and submit it to you guys this weekend. So make sure I capture it the way we talked about it. And then, is there anything that, of some of the other things that were put out here, is there anything that we're missing that you want to add as a goal or want the board to consider as a goal?
I would throw out technology, making sure we're utilizing that to the maximum somehow or other.
I think those are 5 lofty goals,
They are, I know that.
so I wouldn't say,
Let's stay right
I wouldn't
with
see
that.
us moving any farther than this.
Just on that point, technology is something we're working on every day, trying to peak what we've got and make sure that it's functioning. As you can see, we're having some difficulty in here.
Randy's the only one with the mics on me.
I will, I'll rewrite and have it out to you guys this week, and then just, you know, hit me back if I miss something in the discussion.
That'd be good.
And we'll accept it as a draft and we'll finalize it next time. The next item on our agenda is to consider the fire department officer appointments. I know you guys all got the information from Randy Gerard and Manager Gerard. I'll turn this to you.
I really don't have a whole lot to add. You know, the chief and I were not successful in completing the project this year for a number of reasons. Some our own, some not our own, but at any event, we have talked. I've met with the chief and assistant chief, and the reason I'm asking to extend it to February is we're all going to be in Traverse City next week, and we have a couple of items on their agenda, and so I hope that as a group, since all board members are going to be there, we can come back with a better look in terms of exactly what it is that we're looking for. It gives us, the chief and I, a chance to work with a couple of folks that are involved, Mr. Grutzka and Mr. Hammerberg, in the firefighter training program to see if there are some options for us to be able to identify specifically what it is that we may need and what might be the first thing for us to address in our own department.
What I would say, Randy, and you and I have had this conversation, I'm disappointed, we're disappointed as a board that it wasn't followed through. Personally, I'm disappointed because this goes back to October of 2012 when I first did that fire department MTA publication and gave it up to board members. We started the conversation. We got the information from the MTA and Catherine Mulhout and about how some of the stuff like officer training was important, especially for a community like ours. We're no longer a small township. We're very highly visible. We're trying to attract something like a Duke Life Point or a Up the Sky development and a $100 million development. I think there's certain things that we have to have, and if the board will recall the conversations that I had with legal counsel and the MTA legal counsel in regards to our training aspects of officer training. We knew that there were some challenges in the UP but yet we have 2 state-certified trainers working for us in the fire department that could certainly handle doing this officer training. The Hammerberg guy, I forget his first name, but from Escanaba, I did a little bit of research a couple weeks ago, and I find out that he was just awarded, Fire Officer Instructor of the Year, and it's on the website for LARA, the licensing thing from Michigan.gov. The guy's in Escanaba, he gets Instructor of the Year for Fire Officer Training. And we had over a year and we didn't get it done. I'm disappointed. You're the personnel director, and I would expect better that you would have got that done. We should have been able to do it in-house. That clearly failed, and now I want it done. To me, it's not fair to the department to have these guys who are up on officer candidates and say, well, we didn't actually get their training done. How do we as a board say, yeah, we're going to approve the slate of officers for the fire department, knowing that they weren't trained? We talked about the importance. The board has to have it done, and it didn't get done. And to me, that's just unacceptable. And it's back in your goals again for this year, but this has to be done. And the fire department always said, well, you had to go downstate, and it was 80 hours or something. You had to go downstate, and then when I do the research and find out the guy who wins Instructor of the Year lives in Escanaba, seems to me like we probably could have got it done, especially in light of the fact that we have 2 state-certified instructors in our own department. Dan?
I agree that the training is necessary. I'm not going to argue that one bit. My problem I have is the fact that we want to keep holding off approving this slate of officers. These 9 individuals that are on this thing, if you were to actually take a look at the time in service and take an average, you'd find probably over 20 years average time in service. To say that this board does not approve the fact that they were the officers, which most of these individuals have been officers for a very long time, to me gives a vote of no confidence to the members of the department. Just because they did not complete one class that apparently nobody can figure out exactly what to make of this class anyway. I would challenge to find any department, including full-time departments in the UP, that actually require officer training. I know it's an important thing, and the department did, as Brandy stated in his memo, bring in somebody to start the aspect. I think the biggest problem we have here is how this is going to be taught, because obviously it's not just a slate of officers that have to be taught the officer training. It's everybody in the department, because at any one point in time, any officer, any person that's in that front seat, if he's not an officer, becomes officer. So if for some reason or other no officers happen to make the call, and a regular firefighter jumps in that front seat, he is now the officer in charge. These are the kind of things, it's not just easy just to say, well, we'll train to 80 hours. People in this department are volunteers. They have other lives. They have other jobs. They work shift work. They can't always make these trainings, and we're requiring them to do this. Now, I'm sure that something's gonna get worked out here to get this training working. But to say that, to put off the fact that you're going to acknowledge that these are the slate of officers simply because they did not get this class, to me it's ridiculous. And like I said, I'll take 20 years of training over a classroom any day. 20 years of experience over a classroom any day. I've seen a lot of people, individuals that go through classes and get major degrees and understand, and common sense completely goes out the window. So again, I just feel that I have to say that I'm disappointed at the fact that we are holding up approval of a slate of officers simply because we didn't get a class. And what's going to happen next month? What's changing? We're going to say, okay, here's the class. Are you going to now approve the fact that they're officers, even though they haven't taken that class yet? Are we going to wait till they take the class? So actually, basically what you're saying is nobody over there across the street is an officer. We have no officers in that department. By not approving this slate, that's basically what you're telling those people. And that bothers me. It bothers me a lot. That's all I have to say about it.
No, I agree, Dan. I think that if you look at everything you said about they're going to I agree. But that doesn't, it should be no problem for them to pass an officer's training course then, and what we'd agreed to do is, didn't have to be 80 hours, we were gonna do an in-house program. In the course of a year, we couldn't get it done and get these guys through some of it. It doesn't make sense to me. What we had said last year is, we'll approve the officers that were before us this time, with the understanding that it'll be completed and everybody will be offered the opportunity if they want to be an officer. Well, a year later, we're saying, well, let's just approve it again and we'll do the same thing. You know, that's a frustrating part for me.
I think what you need to also understand is the fact that the problem is the fact that officer course was no longer offered. That officer course was obsolete. They weren't even, they tried to buy that course from everyone, and that course is not offered anymore. It's not going to be done until March when they will update the course for them. There's a problem there. And I think that they were going to do it in-house. But you have to realize that was, you can't, if you can't get the course, you can't design a class. And that was, to me, I'm sure Randy will back me up, but that was one of the biggest problems. The course is no longer available until March when it's been updated. And that happens to state courses all the time.
Then that should have come back to us as a board and said, here's the deal, here's the update on it. But we never got that information throughout. We just kept getting updates that said, yeah, we're working on it, it's gonna be done, you know.
Then apparently it fell somewhere, because I know that it was told in discussions with the manager. So.
Pete?
I was just gonna ask, in this conversation, Danny sort of insinuated that he's not completely behind that course that's being offered, and if the person from down, say Escanaba came up here, was that the same thing that he would be trying to teach? You know, I don't know.
Well, number one, I never said I wasn't behind it.
I mean, you had questions about it.
Right.
You said you had some questions.
Right, because of the time frame of doing it.
Right. Okay, I thought that maybe the content was.
But you have to realize, again, I'll go back to the same fact that these people are volunteers. They have a life, they have other jobs. To have to force them to work 8 more hours of training. Initially, they go through 6 months of training before they even start in the fire department. If they go into an EMT situation, that's another 6 months of training that they go through. They don't get paid. They go on their own time. They go on weekends. They're away from their family. We train once a month. They're away from their family on that. We have a meeting night once a month, plus the calls.
Yeah.
And again, like I said, you can't just say the slate of officers are the only ones going to take this class, because in all honesty, anybody can be an officer on a truck. So that means everybody in the class everybody in the department has to take that class.
Well, from our standpoint, our officers are required to have officer certification. If you don't want to be an officer, you don't have to take it. And if it's, I mean, that's one thing. It's about being, in the words of the MTA, the fire department is the biggest liability you have as a township, and you have to protect yourself that way. If they jump in a truck and roll and there's no officers on board, there's no officers on board, but we've done everything. We've trained our officers. We're not, you know, not everyone's going to be an officer in the department. I mean, from a liability perspective, if I'm sitting in a courtroom and having to defend that, I can defend that. What I can't defend is that we said we were going to do it and we've just never done it. And I think that whether we do it in-house, we have this Hammerberg guy come up and do it, whatever. If it's delayed, it's delayed. As far as approving the slate of officers that's been presented, you've got Randy's recommendation to hold off until February 4th so that he can explain how it's going to get done. If you want to make a motion to approve those officers as they are right now, that's fine. I guess my only question would be, do we have anybody who has officer training in the department right now that you're aware of?
Chief Sims.
Chief Sims? And then what about Ron and
Ron is officer, but you don't see his name on the officer roll of officers. He's the fire marshal.
or Rob Cochran?
I don't know. I know Rob has through the military. I don't know if it's transferred over into the Michigan.
Okay. So we don't really have anybody else in the department that's had it somewhere else or any other time.
No. But again, I'm going to go from the standpoint that you say liability-wise. If you look at the Good Samaritan law, which falls into the place of the fire departments, the only time that there is liabilities is with gross negligence. You could go to a class and go through 80 hours of class and still contain gross negligence. Nobody, obviously, in their right mind is going to go out at any scene and carry gross negligence. So It's, again, I'm saying, I love the idea of the class. I don't get any problem with that. In fact, I've tried to go to a couple of those classes. But, again, the fact that you're saying that they can't become officers simply because they did not create that class, to me, it doesn't make sense. And for that specific reason, I'll make the motion that we approve the slate of officers with not without exception, but we already know they're gonna take this class at some point in time. But to sit here and actually not have a slate of officers in the fire department, to me, is a bigger liability than not going to this class. Because you're basically telling the public that anybody that's an officer on there isn't an officer according to this board. And they should have no rights to be on that truck.
No, I don't think that's it at all.
Well, but if we don't approve them, they're not officers, correct?
Well, your officers' appointments just continue from last year until the new slate of officers is approved. And it's all the same guys anyway, isn't it?
Well, except one.
So I mean, I think they're still officers until the new slate of officers will be approved. Now, like a planning commission member, if you don't have one, there's still a planning commission member until the new person gets appointed. You know what I'm saying? I think that you do have those guys all are considered officers until such time as the new slate goes through, especially since it's the same individuals anyway, except for one individual. I think you have officers now, but I mean, you made the motion to approve the slate as presented. Is there a second?
Sure. Could we have the background by February 4th, that's 2 weeks from now?
Yeah, that was what manager Gerard proposed.
That's what I would suggest.
But again, my question goes to, what's the background gonna be? That's gonna be different.
That's what I want to wait and see.
Well, I guess my question is, if it comes back that we're gonna have these classes, are you gonna accept that slate of officers?
Then we have to go for the officers and go do the classes.
Well, what would be the point if you don't approve the slate of
Well, until he
officers?
comes back.
What I'm saying is, what would you come back that you would not approve the slate of officers?
I don't know then. I'd wait till for 2 weeks and then I'll see what he says and then we have to deal with it then.
Any other comment? Sorry.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, why can't we just approve the slate of officers contingent on their, training, basically? Because I think they're all gonna go to the class, or try to make it. I mean, if they don't make I guess, I understand where Dan's coming from, they're volunteers and such, and they do have lives like I do. But there is a certain commitment though to that. If you're gonna be an officer, you're gonna have to get the training at some point, during your career as a fireman or fire officer. And they'll do that. If they don't, if we're sitting here by July 1st, and I don't know how long the training's gonna be, so, I don't know how long it's gonna be, but if we're gonna approve the fire officers and, I'm sure they all gonna get the training, which would be fine, but if some don't get the training, what would we do?
Well,
That would be,
the way I look at it is, we're penalizing these officers because we did not accomplish the goal of coming up with this class.
but if we say this year, we're approving you, but we would like, you have to get the training, and we'll provide it for you.
Right, but that goes back to,
Yeah, that's
it's
something.
not their fault that the
Yeah.
training isn't
But this, looking forward, we would try to remedy that situation. So,
Yeah.
That's what
there.
I'm
I
saying.
think there was, last year they tried to remedy it. Unfortunately, they ran into the snag of not being able to get the class.
Yeah, if the class wasn't offered, then there's not much you can do about it. We were in a big transition last year too, so that was another thing that people can't lose sight of. We were moving facilities and moving fire halls and
Lynn, just to bring you up to speed, there's a motion and a second on the table. Dan made a motion to approve the slate of officers as presented.
And the only comment I would say is I'd just like to say, just to have in somewhere that they do get the proper training, because that's important, that's the most important part of it, because it's not fair to us, it's not fair to them. If they're an officer and we don't get them the proper training.
Well, that was a board record.
Yeah.
That's still there as a board record.
So they have to get the proper training, so.
Manager Gerard?
The main reason that Chief and I have asked for the delay, basically, is so we can have discussion with Amberberg and Gretska about, is there another mechanism? As Dan mentioned, there's great concern about the 80-hour training. It's an 80-hour program, 80 hours of training. And the ability for some of the staff members that are currently officers or would like to be officers to be able to invest that amount of time basically to do it. So one of the things we're trying to determine is there any kind of a mechanism such as in a university setting, you can test out of the program, that passing a test. We're trying to find out if there's some kind of an avenue that we could utilize to identify whether, as Dan says, the knowledge currently exists within our department to be able to demonstrate that they have the skills already in place. That's why we're asking to delay till the February 4th meeting, so we can have those discussions and determine whether or not that is an option for them to consider.
So what do you say about Dan's point where regardless, the slate of officers isn't going to change, there isn't anybody else who has officer training, so what's the difference if we delay it 2 weeks or if we vote to approve the slate of officers now?
Well, I think the position you took is the correct position. We have appointed officers in place that would continue in place with the exception of the one that did not wish to continue. You had one officer that, for whatever reason, I don't know what the reason was, decided not to continue as an officer, and another has been appointed in that place. I think Bill has, the one that was appointed has just as much experience, if not more, than the one that didn't continue. I think Dan can speak to that. I don't know.
Okay, Ernie?
Listen to all this conversation, and I go back to 80 hours of training. You could be talking 3 to 4 months before you can get them through, because 80 hours, at 8 hours, you're talking about 10 sessions. And some of these people, the working shift work, everything else, you're talking 3 to 4 months down the road before they even get close to completing in that.
Well, and that's why we want to see if there's an alternative, to be able to test what knowledge we currently have and see if it's even necessary for everybody to go through the training. It may not be. There may be 1 or 2 that might need to have the training because they can't demonstrate the knowledge and skills or whatever, but kind of a testing out, if you will, type of a scenario.
But even doing that, then you have to find out where you can test it out, right, and how you can set up the program for doing it. So you're talking time frame there to get all that done too.
And that's
So
the folks in Escanaba, so we're not talking about, if there's a test available, people go to Escanaba for an afternoon to take the test. It's not that big a deal.
Why can't we do it here?
No, I don't know that I think they would probably have to proctor it.
Okay.
Would be my guess. The university, at the university level, if you do that, it's proctored by the university.
We've got a motion and a second on the table. If there's any other comment, we'll go to a vote. Motion, Victoria, you want to just tell me the motion again?
The motion from trustee Pompel, supported by trustee Trescott, is to present her to move the current, proposed slate of fire officers as presented.
If there's no other discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Nay. The only reason I'm opposed, Dan, I agree. I think that they're all the same guys. I think that they still remain officers, and wait 2 weeks, and they'll still be the same officers then or no. I would still have on there, Randy, that you're gonna bring us the update
Yes.
on the next agenda.
We will still pursue it.
The next item on your agenda is manager's report.
The only additional comment that what I had on my manager's report was I was going to, 2 items. One was I was going to reflect back to the purchase, the water purchase, just to reinforce basically we're still purchasing up to 60 million gallons of water from the city of Marquette under our contract. It's a budgeted item. The only other comment was on the bills payable. There was an item on there for repairs to the Impala. I just wanted board members to recognize what occurred is the rear struts needed to be replaced on the Impala, and that's what the cost was, $486, I believe it was, for the parts and labor. That did put the car back into full full use. It's still been a positive financial impact for us. Been running back and forth to Lansing, Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids, Chicago, saving us mileage. So if you look at the mileage reimbursement amounts, you see a dramatic reduction in the amount of mileage that's being paid out. One trip to Lansing is a $500 mileage charge. So we're avoiding that. That's just the cost of gas.
Thanks, Randy. Any questions for Randy in regards to his manager's report about anything or that he reported on, or anything else you want to ask him about? Ernie?
We keep talking about this boulevard section out on 41, going
Yes.
up past Target and that. Have we talked to the businesses? Have they come back with any kind of positive or negative to that for their, on their
There's a lot of negative about the corridor. We're hearing, there's a lot of negative comments about the corridor in general, the way it's set up, the Michigan lefts, the way it looks, primarily, and what MDOT, this is an MDOT project, it's not ours, not our project. What we're trying to do is dovetail with that to make it look better, the aesthetics that Jason's been working on. But what MDOT is trying to do is MDOT is reacting to, in particular in the area of Lowe's, west of Walmart, the number of crashes we've been having out there. Their view is that if we extend that boulevard section out past that area, which would basically be to the intersection by Best Buy, if you extend that boulevard section out there with Michigan lefts, you're going to reduce those traffic crashes because you won't be having the left turn coming out. And I can tell you today, I almost witnessed one again today. It was coming out of the GFS when I was heading west. There was a truck coming out of GFS, pickup truck, with a guy talking on the cell phone with his hand, trying to turn left with this hand, pulled right out in front of two cars. Didn't even see it, pulled right out in front of him. So I know it was a near miss. It was almost a broadside. But again, distracted driver. It's got nothing to do with it. But the boulevard section would have not allowed that. You'd have to turn right, go to a Michigan left and come back. So that's where MDOT's going.
Because I look at it going into Menards and that, and going into the development back in there too. They're gonna have, left-hand turns up there, it's gonna create a lot of traffic problems.
Yeah, they'll be putting Michigan lefts in, is what they'll be doing. So you'll go beyond Menards and come back to the driveway. Now, I mean, that's what they're looking to do.
Which means you have to go across 2 lanes of traffic to make a turn into them.
Right, basically, if you're coming, if you're trying to get to Menards, from Lowe's, you'd come out of Lowe's, make a right-hand turn to the Michigan left and go back.
Other questions for Manager Jordan?
MDOT views that as a safer section of the road.
Seeing none. Public comment? Seeing none. There's no formal discussion. Additional comments from board members? Lynn? Diana?
None.
Ernie?
I have some comments on the master plan, but I think we'll wait until we're past that.
Okay. Randy?
I have none.
Dan? Nope. Pete?
I attended a meeting the other day on parliamentary procedure and also the Sunshine Act. We have copies, and Dennis has copies, if you'd like to have a copy of what's there. Overall, I think we do a good job as far as running the meetings and stuff like that, information. Somebody wants me to forward requests, I think we do a pretty good job. If you want copies, I give Dennis the copies.
He did ask me we didn't have enough copies for everyone, but I'll have some run off and get some in your mailbox, and mostly it's just part of the procedure, FOIA, Sunshine Act. If there are no other additional comments from board members, we would, the next item on our agenda is to move into closed session. Clerk Tari?
I move to close closed session pursuant to MCL 15.268C, strategy and negotiation sessions connected with negotiation of collective bargaining agreement. Either negotiating party request a closed hearing. I move that.
Support. We have motion and support.
Clerk Peters is yes. Trustee Pompey?
Yes.
Trustee LaRue?
Yes.
Trustee Grant?
Yes.
Trustee Trescott?
Yes.
Treasurer Johnson?
Yes.
And Supervisor Lehman.
Yes.
Closed session at 9:41 p.m.
Thank you.